We will begin this morning on page 30. As we noted last time, we've spent much of the class talking about kind of specific dealing with positions questions, and the last few lessons are a little more, I don't know, they're a little different than the rest. So we're going to briefly kind of recap lesson 9 because we finished that quickly on Wednesday, and then we'll begin lesson 10. Our goal today will be get through at least the first 2, maybe the first 3 sections of lesson 10 so that we can complete it on Wednesday, and then we have exactly one more class, and so the final exam is lesson 11, and we'll do that 1 week from tonight. Today, 1 week from today. Before we get started, Jonathan, would you mind to say a word of prayer for us?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father God, we thank you for this day, the blessings you've given to us. Mindful of this time, the physical blessings you bestowed upon this, the theme of this class. We just ask that you would help us to reflect on the things that Michael's prepared as we study your word. We ask that you would help us to good stewards of what you've given to us. And just thank you so much for all those physical blessings you bestowed upon us. Particularly thankful for the fathers this day. Just thank you for the blessings they've bestowed in our lives. We thank you most of all for the spiritual blessings you've given to us, and chief among those given to your Son. Just ask you to help us to honor him in our words and deeds, and that you will be done in all things. Lord God, you see Christ. Amen.
Amen. So I wanted to, first because there are a few folks that weren't here, and second because we finished it very quickly, the summary of lesson 9 that we went through on Wednesday, take just a couple minutes and touch on that again. So, you know, the sections of lesson 9, and I'm going all the way back to page 26. So there are 4 sections of lesson 9, and the summary that we talked about on Wednesday was section 1, we were made in God's image to work. God's a worker. We were made in God's image to work. Now that work may be for a paycheck. It may be for volunteer. It may be for our families. It may be for the church. We were made to work. Section 2, our task is to glorify God in that work, to project God's image in that work. And so how do we do that? We talked about a couple different ways. One, we do it in how we work, with diligence, with honesty, with excellence, the traits. We're going to project God's image, then God's image is seen in our how we work. Then we also talked about we bless others in the output of what we produce. What is our work? Whether that is serving others, raising kids, working in the church, the work that we do, what the output of our work, what we produce, is God's blessing and projects God's image. And if you think about it in that way, there are people who would not even acknowledge God as part of their work, and yet God is working through them to bless others. Genesis 2:5. Remember we talked about that verse. Blessings come from God's care and our effort. Rain and work of the ground brought forth crops. God's care, our effort, brings about blessings. And so we have whatever our vocation, whatever our call to serve others, we project God's image in our work. And we also talked about a fallen world frustrates that efforts. Why does it feel like it's difficult to do that? Because sometimes Satan gets in the way. Fallen world frustrates our efforts. Section 3, whatever skill, whatever success we have, just like our material possessions, those skills, those successes, those promotions, that advancement, it is from God. We better recognize that that's from God. So those things all come from the Father. And then section 4, discontent comes from comparison. So are we going to let somebody else's fortune become our discontent? Because that was part of the issue with the parables of workers in the vineyard. We went through the extended example of where our daily bread comes from. and all the different work and businesses that are involved in My Daily Bread. And then Seth had a great comment that I'm going to steal. He said, we can talk about 500 different businesses and all the work that goes into My Daily Bread between the bakers and the millers and the transport and the diesel and all those things that we talked about, and none of it matters if God doesn't give the rain. It is all irrelevant if the rain doesn't come. So, again, you go through all that, you think, man, look at everything we're doing as humans to provide for each other daily bread, and then ultimately, none of it matters if God doesn't provide the rain. Everything we do is in the service of others, is a combination of God's blessing and our work going together to serve others. Any last thoughts on lesson 9 before we move on? All right, page 30, lesson 10. So again, this is a little bit unique, a little different kind of lesson than we've done in the past. This talks about a balance between two, I wouldn't say necessarily competing forces, but forces that can at times seem to come in opposition, and that is the balance or the push and pull between contentment and ambition. And I hope that this is a balance I struggle with. This is one I think about a lot. So I hope that you'll help me think through it. So let's do section 1, then we'll talk a little bit about the world that we're in and how it thinks about contentment and ambition. So is anybody able to do number 1, just talk about these words, the definition of contentment. What's contentment?
A state of inner peace and satisfaction with one's current circumstances. It is the quiet realization that in the present moment you have enough.
That's a great definition. Can you read the first part of that one more time? I thought there's 2 or 3 great words in there, Madeline. Can you read that one more time?
A state of inner peace and satisfaction with one's current circumstances.
So I think satisfaction is a very key word there. Satisfaction with your current circumstances. You are content. You're happy in your current situation. Inner peace was another part of the definition that Madeline provided for us. Kind of all generally understand what contentment is, but good to put a definition on it there. Other definitions or other thoughts about what it means to be content?
I kind of thought of a percent if you're undisturbed.
Yes.
Regardless of circumstances.
Regardless of external circumstances, yes. I think that's an important part of it. Inner peace, Madeline talked about in the present circumstance. And as we talked about, Paul will talk about regardless of what that circumstance is, we can be satisfied, happy, content in our current situation. We're going to hold Philippians 4 because I think that's kind of a key passage on contentment. So we're going to hold question 2 for just a moment and look at number 3, which defines this other term that we'll talk about in our class. So we've got contentment, happy in our current situation. What about ambition? Definition for ambition.
Want the biblical definition or the dictionary? Because
Whatever makes you happy.
It's interesting that the dictionary definition is different than what is often talked about in the Bible. So the dictionary definition is a desire to achieve a particular end or a desire for activity or exertion.
So a desire, let's talk about this a minute, a desire to achieve a particular end. I think that largely covers what the dictionary would define that. Did you have more there? Sorry.
And then the concordance, when you look up, I just chose Philippians 2:5, selfish ambition. Vainglory is what the King James uses. Empty pride, a vain opinion, or error.
So
Think about that in today's English. When we say someone has ambition, it's usually positive.
Yes.
We're saying it in a positive way. But the Bible's more, the Greek word is more negative.
So there's a Greek word that's often translated selfish ambition. So it's really kind of one word that's I think, there may be other examples, translated as a couple words, but you're exactly right. And you can find many examples in the ESV for sure where ambition has the word selfish right along with it. You see that in Philippians, you see it in James, that there is a selfish ambition, and we're going to talk about that. But at its core, I think that the dictionary definition is just an internal motivation, an internal desire to achieve some end, to achieve some goal. So, right way to get into this conversation. What do you think in general, what does the world think about being content? Just be content with the way things are, be content in your current circumstances. How would you define the world's attitude toward that?
I think it's always shifting.
Okay?
We're content in this moment until we put our eyes on something else, and then, we'll be content if we get there.
Yes.
So it's not just I would say that we're just never content.
In general, yeah, in general, and we'll talk about the kind of the culture we're in, because that's what we know best in America, that most people do not define themselves as content. And if you ask the question, well, the answer is often, I could be content if, right? That there's a parameter, there's a circumstance, there's something that could happen. If I just could live in this neighborhood, or if I could just get that raise, if I could just get my kids out of the house, I could be content. There's always something, there's just one thing away from,
Are you struggling
It
to
didn't.
have something to share?
no, it didn't work. No, I'm just kidding. No, there's always just one thing away from being content.
Well, it's, I forget who was talking about it the other day. It might have been you. You know, we talk about like somebody is up for a promotion and they say, "No, I'm content to stay where I am," and it's kind of like we question their work ethic. Yeah,
Yes.
question their work ethic, or what do you mean you're like you don't want to? And there's a phenomenon where we rise to our level of competence chasing commitment. So you might be content and be really good at your current position, but you're constantly chasing the next level on the ladder, and you reach a place where you're not qualified or you don't have the competence to do that level of work, and then it goes from discontent to almost like a depression, like you feel completely incapable.
The core of that is this kind of just basic belief that we should always be trying to get to the next step. There's just a kind of a core kind of a core belief that we should always be trying to do the next thing. We should always be trying to be promoted to the next level, always trying to take the next step, always trying to make more, always trying to have, move to the better neighborhood, to the bigger house. We should always be trying to move.
It's cultural though, because
No question.
when we were in Costa Rica, they were talking about it being a blue zone. A blue zone, there's like 7 areas in the world where people live longer, they're healthier overall, they're happier. And one of the things that the tour guide mentioned when he was telling us about these blue zones is they're content. They're content with what they have, even though they might be in poverty. They're content where they live. They have more free time because they're more content, so they can take care of themselves. And so there are cultures out there where it's not a endless chase.
So we kind of live in this current environment we're in where there is this discontent.
So, trying very much to keep politics out of this.
Thank you.
But, and I think this has probably changed. I think it's not quite the culture that we live in. But there is a sense in which, if you put America first, you're going to your ambition is going to be to do very good in school, so you get very good in college, so you get very good jobs, so you get this. And it's just this honor system almost, where you get more honor as you do more. And don't reach this place where you say, okay, I've done enough. And I wonder if that somewhat drives our thinking of what ambition is it's really almost dishonorable to not have that drive to want to reach that next level, because that's what we've been told our whole life, that for America to be great, you have to you have to always be trying to reach the next plateau, the next rung of the ladder.
World is constantly progressing. We have to move the ball. We're going to move the ball down the field. We're going to progress. If I ask you just your immediate gut reaction to the phrase status quo, what's your immediate gut reaction to that?
You gotta do better than you said it.
Right? Status quo is, I would think, largely perceived as negative. Like the world perceives status quo as, we're not going to accept the status quo. We're not like, we're kind of just going to stick, you know what? What's the literal definition of status quo? Does anybody know? Literal definition of the Latin? The current circumstance. Status quo is the current circumstance. So, or exactly the circumstance in which the current circumstance. So, when we talk about we're not going to be satisfied with status quo, what we're saying is I'm not going to be satisfied in the current circumstance, which is almost exactly the opposite of the definition that Madeline read for us about contentment, where we are satisfied in the current circumstance. In the business world, how many companies have the idea of never being satisfied as kind of one of their core beliefs? If you look at the mission statement of Nike or of, I got the list, but I won't bore you with it. It's literally baked into what they believe. We are never satisfied. And the world sees that as ambition, right? We're never satisfied. So, how do we, there is this natural, healthy conflict between these two things. How do we remain content while not vilifying ambition? That's kind of the point of this lesson, is how do we make sense of that in our own minds? How do we marry contentment and ambition? And can we have both and are both godly and in Christ's image? So Philippians 4 is kind of a key passage on contentment. And when I talk about this, I think you can use this thinking about your financial situation, right? Your budget or your work status, or like there's so many places where contentment and ambition does that have to do with my job, my vocation, or does it have to do with my pay level? Does it have to do with where I am spiritually? Take this lesson, I think, in all those different ways. Philippians 4, 10 through 13. I think we know these verses, but let's read them. Let's read them together. Somebody care to read Philippians 4, 10 through 13?
Okay. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have received your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Now that I speak from, not that I speak from one, for I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled, going hungry, both having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
So question 2 is, what is Paul's perspective on contentment? How did you answer that question, question 2? Based on that passage, what is Paul's perspective on contentment?
Being in prison.
Say it again.
And he was in prison.
In prison during the writing of this letter. It's important that at least incarcerated. So, how do you describe Paul's perspective on contentment? Kyle.
Just something that stands out before he starts talking about being hungry and having abundance and suffering and having little. He uses this phrase, I know how
Okay.
to get along.
Okay.
I mean, his perspective of contentment has something to do with a knowledge of what's really important, what he really needs, and what he really has. I think is maybe something that he's trying to express there. I have a knowledge, and that's what fuels my contentment.
I would only add to that statement, if you go in the middle of verse 12, how did he come about that knowledge? in any and every circumstance, I have learned. Is a learned, this wasn't an inborn thing for Paul. This was a learned attribute. This was a learned characteristic. This knowing how to handle and be content in any circumstance was a learned thing. Annie.
In previous classes, we've discussed how important humility is, and knowing that everything we have belongs to God, and any success or anything like any talents we have is all because of God. And so he's learned like it's in and through Christ that he can endure or do all things. So whether that's surviving being shipwrecked or being imprisoned or stoned or the thorn that's in his flesh, God has taught him and he has learned my grace is sufficient for you.
Yes.
The Lord's power is made perfect in weakness.
Yes.
And so through this refinement, and he's talked before that he does not, put any stock in his flesh, right? And that he fixes his eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. So all he does is he's in everything he does, whether it's making tents, preaching, it's all for the Lord. And he says that in Colossians 3, I think 22-ish, he talks about telling slaves, like, remember, like, whether you're seen by your owner or not,
Yes.
you're working in reverence for Christ, like, in everything that we do.
Yes.
It's for him, and I just think through everything that he's been through, that's the lesson God's driving home.
So those abilities and that working for God, and he says, allows him to have this attitude, this type of contentment. I think it's interesting the two situations that he notes specifically. He could have talked about anything that I don't think I'm taking this too far. He could have talked about anything that tested his contentment, but he talked about two different places in life particularly. What did he talk about in verse 12?
Being filled and going hungry.
Yeah. Being filled and being hungry. Your version read that differently, which I thought was unique. Can you read verse 12 again?
I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need.
So the first part of that verse where he talks about, I've learned how to get along with humble means and be content, but I've also learned to deal with prosperity and to be content. That's an interesting comment. That it was, and again, I don't think I'm reading too much into this, that he had to learn in both of those circumstances that they both come with their own possibility of discontentment, right? And maybe we think about that easily on the dealing with not enough. You can see where it would be easy to be discontent. But Paul also said when he had plenty, when he was in prosperity, that he had to learn contentment. I think that's an interesting comment. We don't think about the danger of prosperity. We've talked about it in this class, and how that can bring about discontent.
Think about being content in prosperity, meaning not wanting more, but sometimes we can be discontent, wishing maybe not money-wise, but possibly having less things to do, having less if we're in a really busy season of life, or even with money, the more money you have, the more you have to manage well, and that can bring additional stress. And so it's also possible, I think that's a way that Satan is tricky to, think about contentment only in the terms of wanting more. Sometimes we can be discontented in abundance because we wish things were simpler. Or we compare with somebody who has less and think how simple their life is and how much less stress they have, and we wish we could be less burdened, maybe.
Comparison is the thief of contentment. Is that right? There's a lesson about the workers in the vineyard from that, for sure. I agree with that. Yes, sir.
First of all, even Jesus had to learn learn, just like Paul, how to be obedient in the subject, even the Son of God.
Yes.
So we all have to learn this. And the reason we do is because I believe that this is maybe the direction we're going with this, putting these two words together, contentment and ambition. But this really comes back to our heart and our motivation. And that means that it's self. It's self. The direction we're going with ourselves,
Yes.
in our thoughts, in our actions. And so when we think about this concept of ambition, when we think about being able to be content, being wealthy, or being poor, it really comes back to or our desire to have more or to be better or whatever, to our inward heart in the direction we're going with. If our inward heart says, everything I have, everything I am, belongs to God. I am thankful. I am grateful. I am beyond understanding of God's love and His complete generosity to me and His grace towards me. And if that's our thoughts, then our selfish ambitions will not be evil. They will be towards selfishly giving everything to God that we do and think and say.
Yes.
And so when we're in prison, because of God and His mission that He gave us, God, you put me here, Paul says. You know, why? I was doing all this great work for you out there. Why in the world would you have me go through all this and then put me in prison? Why would you do this? No. I mean, maybe he had some kind of, but he always came back to the fact that God is always taking care of me. He will in this case too. I am content. I am His. I belong to Him. And when we have that kind of mindset, then that is a learned process.
No question.
Because we are so extremely selfish. We want to go and do whatever we want to do. We want to enjoy our accomplishments.
Yes.
And I don't want to preach, but I already have. I'm sorry. It's just one of those things that we have to look at ourselves and our heart and make sure that the direction it's going is the direction it should be towards God.
I'm going to pull a couple things out of what Steve said there. One is Paul is the example, and we're going to look at Paul in a couple of other verses. Did Paul have ambition? He absolutely did. He was an ambitious person, and he tells us what his ambitions were. So, and yet he was content. So they're not incompatible. We shouldn't set them up as if they're incompatible. What are our ambitions? Selfish ambition and contentment is probably incompatible. But what were Paul's ambitions? The second thing that he said, which just what I was getting ready to get into, is you talked about it's within ourselves. That word, and this might be a good note to have, the word in Philippians 4 and verse 11, Paul says, I know what in whatever situation I'm in to be content. That Greek word content is autarkos. It doesn't mean anything to you. But it just basically means enough within itself. Automatic, it works, it runs by itself. It does something by itself. Within itself, it's enough. The definition is very close to, in the right way, self-sufficient. And we wouldn't think about, like we never want to think of ourselves as being self-sufficient, but in the way that Paul uses it, verse 13, through Him who strengthens me, that there was nothing external that Paul required for his contentment. He was self-sufficient. Everything that he needed for his contentment was within himself. And Christ that strengthened him was within him, right? So everything that Paul needed for his contentment was within himself. What's interesting was this is a word that was used by the philosophers of the day to think about like Stoic kind of philosophers, right? To think about a fiercely independent, grit your teeth, and through sheer willpower, be content even in difficult circumstances. That, like, it's all about me. It is like through sheer willpower, I can not react, right? You think about the word stoic, that's what we think about, right? Non-reactive. just by sheer will, I cannot react no matter what's going on around me. And this is exactly the word that they used. And Paul kind of turns it on its head. This is not willpower, self-sufficient contentment, but this is Christ-dependent, not independent, but Christ-dependent contentment. Anyway, just think that his use of that word there is very interesting. And the difference between kind of this independent contentment, I don't need anything, I can handle life, versus a dependent, I don't need anything, because I have Jesus, I can handle life, is a very different way of thinking about autarkias, but that's what Paul did. So we got this dependent Christ power contentment. Let's go on to question 4. And this touches on a couple of things we've already talked about. If you had a concordance in the ESV, you found the word ambition a few different times. I know in other versions it may be different. But can anybody name a few verses where we see the word ambition in the New Testament? 2 Corinthians 5.
Verse 9. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether at home or absent, be pleasing to him.
So your version may have ambition. My version, that one says aim, but I think the idea is exactly the same. We have as our ambition, we have as our aim to please him. That is our ambition. So, can you have ambition and contentment? Paul said it was his ambition to please God. By the way, I would also add Romans 15:20 as one of Paul's ambitions, is I make it my ambition to preach the gospel. That's Romans 15:20. So Paul had ambition. Those are two examples of that. Other places you might see the word ambition.
On the negative side, Philippians 1:17.
Yep.
Philippians 2:3.
So twice in Philippians we see the negative side of ambition.
The word selfish in front of it.
Correct. And it carries this word selfish with it. 2 times in Philippians, 2 times in James. The word ambition is used in a very negative way, and it's interesting, it always carries this word selfish with it. Philippians 1:17, Paul's talking about some people who preach the gospel out of selfish ambition. That's one Greek word, but Paul uses it to talk about this elevating of self, creating division, selfish ambition. Use the same word in Philippians chapter 2 in verse 3. We're maybe familiar with that passage. If there's any encouragement in Christ, if there's any comfort in love, that passage, be of the same mind, be in full accord, do nothing from selfish ambition. Okay? A couple more examples, and then we'll make a couple comments. James chapter 3 uses this same idea 2 times. And again, carries this word selfish with it in 14 through 16. James 3:14. If you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, again, your version may have a different word there. That's English Standard. If you have selfish ambition in your heart, don't lie to the truth. I think what he's trying to say there is, don't call yourself a Christian and become a liar against the truth if you're carrying selfish ambition. And he says actually the first thing in verse 16, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there's disorder and evil. So that is largely the core of it, is what is our ambition? So, is it possible to have ambition and contentment? Yes, Paul did. What kind of ambition may lead to discontent? Selfish ambition.
We wouldn't want, when you think of the kingdom and what Paul was talking about when he spoke of it positively, we would never want to be content with the size of the church or the number of Christians or even our own spiritual growth. And so when it's Godward, we want to have lots of ambition, and that's not the selfish ambition, that's a Godward ambition. When it's selfward, that's incompatible with contentment.
So now, that is, all that is 100% the core of the lesson, right? The difference between godly ambition and selfish ambition. I think the harder question is, well, then what do we say about the Christian who does want to be promoted, who does want to improve their circumstance, who does want to, in the world's definition, achieve success? Is that selfish ambition? Kyle?
Note that word, one, it's a different word that is used whenever Paul's writing about selfish ambition versus we make it our ambition.
Yes, sorry, should have made that clear.
Two very, very different words.
Yes.
And the selfish ambition word is an older Greek word which was used back even in the days of Aristotle. It was political. And so we shouldn't be talking about it in this class. But it was the pursuit of a political office by any unfair means.
James used it, not me.
I think to your question, if my ambition to get ahead in my business is purely about me and doesn't take into account the cost of my soul or the cost of the people around me that I'm willing to just step on and abuse and mistreat to get there, then yeah, it's a problem. But there's a difference between a selfish ambition and an ambition to work heartily for the Lord and to please Him.
That's a good comment.
I think it's important to, at least in my mind, to bring the word laziness into the conversation and think about the way that we define that, because a lot of people, most people, would define the kind of contentment that says, I'm content in my job, I don't want to move up, I'm content with what I have, I don't want more. In our culture, most of us would say it's kind of lazy. You just don't work. And so and the Bible condemns laziness in several places. So how do we define laziness, and how does that compare to contentment? And do Christians, are we guilty of being so afraid of slothfulness that we look down on contentment sometimes?
So, good thoughts?
And then on the flip side of that, we have times in life where we literally cannot work, maybe due to health.
Sure.
And Satan can use that to make you feel like you're not as good or this or that.
Yes.
And that's where it all comes back to what's been said earlier by many people, the heart. And I think when Kyle brought up 2 Corinthians 5, like aim or ambition, it goes right on to say, in verse 14, it's Christ's love compels us. And in 16 it says, so from now on we regard no one from a worldly point of view. And it's this idea again that it's the heart, the motivation, whether we are able-bodied or not, as long as we have breath. How can I glorify you today, Lord?
That Christ's love compels us in that same section is a really interesting thought to add to this. I think that's a really good thought.
Hey, Michael, to add what you said before, like, when I was, I don't know if you're going to bring this up in this lesson, but to me we have to be really, really careful what's taught to our children in this regard, because I'll never forget, I was sitting in a college class years and years ago, and this guy brought in, one of our teachers brought in their son. He was so proud of him. I mean, he was bringing tears that his son had accomplished. And what his son had done is he got his master's degree just under 5 years. He'd gone on to be the youngest partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers history. You know PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big 4 accounting firms. And with that, he's working, he had to work 70 hours a week and do all this, and he's got family, and he's showing how much legacy he's leaving his family now. And And I'm not saying that I don't know what the background is, what they had before, but you can tell based on the emotional piece that it hit him, that was something that he must have somehow put or stressed upon his son when he was younger. So that is, you know, do this to take care of your.
That's what success is.
It says, and almost, and even if you said to your family, that's a danger. I think maybe the devil puts in like, hey, you're protecting, taking care of your family, you're achieving something that's not a bad thing. I don't think those things achieving in themselves are bad, but just to add to what Annie and what said before, if the desire is not to serve Christ and
Yes.
accomplishing those things and doing those things, I think that's where that becomes the selfish.
What Kyle said, you know, if we're working to the Lord, something I said is run off half the room. If we're working to the Lord, if it's that idea that we talked about in lesson 9, that what we do is serving others and our vocation is in the service of others, and that we do it in a godly way and it's God glorifying and working to the Lord, we should probably want more of that. Like, that's a good thing. It's okay to want more of that. When it gets into selfish ambition is a different thing. A couple of verses before we're done this morning. 1 Thessalonians 4, again, talk about an ambition. What should we aspire to? So I would put this, again, just into our thoughts as we think about this idea. 1 Thessalonians 4. I'm going to start in the middle of verse 10. We could read more of the passage, but for sake of time, start in verse 10. There in the middle. We urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, to aspire, make it your ambition, to aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you. To live a simple and quiet life, so that you may walk properly among outsiders and be dependent on no one. So that was aspiration. One other comment or verse that I think is very important I want to add before the bell. 1 Corinthians 7. Is it okay to want to improve your situation in life? Is that okay? Here, I think we get a snippet of that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I'm going to start in verse 17. But the real core of it is in verse 21. I'll give you a hint, but I'm going to start in verse 17 and get the whole context of the passage. Let each person live the life that the Lord has assigned to him, or you might have that he is called to. That's all. That's that vocation idea. Let each person live the life that the Lord has assigned to him, and which God has called. This is my rule in all the churches. Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the mark of circumcision. Was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision. Circumcision doesn't count for anything, nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. Each one should remain in the condition, in the assignment where he was called. Were you a slave or a bondservant when you were called? Don't be concerned about it. In parentheses, in my version. But if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself of the opportunity. For he who is called to the Lord as a slave is a free man in the Lord. He was free when he was called as a servant of Christ. You're bought with a price. Don't become servants of men. In whatever condition you were called, there let him remain with God. I think that's such an interesting comment in verse 21. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't be concerned about it, as in you can be a faithful, godly Christian person as a slave. Don't worry about that. Don't worry that because of your condition that you're not going to be able to serve faithfully. Don't worry about because you're in condition you're not going to be able to give as much as somebody else or be able to serve as much as someone else because of the life circumstance that you're in. Paul says, don't worry about that. But then he makes a very interesting comment. But if you can gain your freedom, if you can improve your situation, if you can improve your state in life, avail yourself of the opportunity. Talk more about that next time. But is it okay to want to improve your situation in life? Paul told the Corinthians, if you have that opportunity, take advantage of it, as long as you can do it within the calling to which you were called to be a member of the body of Christ. So we'll try to get through sections 3. We touched on a little bit on section 2. Get through sections 3 and 4 next time. Thanks everybody for their time this morning.